It's ad break time. I'm proud to announce that the Beyond Solitaire podcast is sponsored by Central Michigan University's Center for Learning Through Games and Simulations. Although the Kickstarter campaign for their most recent game, Hydrologic Cycle, has ended, you can now pre-order copies of the game, so go and support science games if you are so inclined. Their next Kickstarter campaign for Eyeball to Eyeball, a Cold War simulation game, will launch in late June. CLGS also continues to offer classes in partnership with Gen Con. Their next course will be Intermediate Role-Playing Game Design with Eloy Lasanta, and that starts on June 19th. I know it's going to be great. Eloy is a fantastic teacher, and all of his previous students say so. I also want to mention that SDHistCon is hosting an online convention on June 8th. It's a whole day of historical gaming through Discord with tons of demos, talks, and panels. I won't be there this time, but David Thompson will be there for both of us to demo Night Witches, and I know there are a lot of other really cool events happening. Tickets are very cheap, and it's a fantastic time. So you should go to sdhist.com for more details. And with that, let's get on with the show. Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and this week on the pod I have a very special guest. This is Will Thompson. He is a game designer and a publisher through Absurdist Productions. How you doing, Will?
I'm doing good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I haven't talked to you in a long time, not since you were a Zenobia Award finalist.
Yep, that was a couple of years ago now.
Yeah, so it's excellent to to continue that conversation. And actually, one of the reasons we're doing it is because your entry into the Zenobia Award, Winter Rabbit, is now in prep for publication.
That's right.
Excellent.
Yep, we are currently finishing up the art production, and we're planning to launch it on Kickstarter in hopefully July.
Fantastic. That's awesome news. So for people who did not follow Zenobia the first time around, would you just kind of tell us about Winter Rabbit, what it is?
Sure. Yeah, Winter Rabbit is a board game that I created. It's based on Cherokee culture and folklore. So the idea of Winter Rabbit is we're playing these animal characters from Cherokee folklore. So we're bear, wolf, rabbit, otter. Not rabbit. We're the other characters. Rabbit's sort of like also there, but Rabbit in these stories is a trickster. So Rabbit just wants to kind of like mess with everybody and do his own thing. So in the game, it is sort of a worker placement game. I've kind of called it a hidden worker placement game because it's got this mechanic where you are drawing workers from a bag, your little villager tokens from a bag. You can look at them and then you place them face down on locations. And once you have enough, then the resource is produced. So it kind of requires people to work together a little bit, but also those could be a rabbit. And if it happens to be a rabbit, the rabbit steals everything and moves that away. So the goal of the game is basically that we're working together to prepare our village for winter. We have this communal goal. It's a semi-cooperative game of getting all of the resources we need for winter, but then we're also competing because everything we do to contribute toward that goal is getting us points. That we, basically, if we make it, if we're prepared for winter, then whoever has the most points wins. And you get points by completing tasks for other people, which get you points and get them a benefit. You get them by building out the village and by telling stories that change the rules and give like universal benefits for everyone. That's like the simple breakdown of it. It's built around a lot of these ideas of we want really like positive interactions. We want this semi-cooperative idea of, if you sort of like go too hard and too competitive and mess with everybody, then like you could end up failing the thing for everybody. But also you want to kind of balance the universal goal with your personal goals to try to win. And it's got some ideas of sort of conservation built in there where you can, produce more resources immediately, but then that causes the game to be a little bit more difficult to produce those resources in future seasons and future rounds. So there's like these different kind of balance elements built into it as well.
Oh, that's awesome. So, for people who, again, weren't following it through Zenobia, Zenobia is a historical game contest. Winter Rabbit is a game about folklore. If you were to answer the question, in what sense is it a historical game?
Yeah, this is something that I like. I think I definitely had a different take than the other Zenobia entries because a lot of those were, about particular historical events and things like that. And Winter Rabbit went about this a very different way. So in Winter Rabbit, I'm looking at sort of cultural ideas. So it's looking at the stories that were told, but also about this idea, primarily this idea in Cherokee culture called gadugi, which is sort of you can kind of translate it like communal work or like doing community as a verb, right? Like it's um, kind of a little rough to translate, but the idea basically is that we are as a community coming together to make sure that everybody's needs are met. And so the game is in a sense trying to show that contextually, right? Within the game, as well as just kind of get across this idea of what are some of the cultural values that exist within Cherokee culture, like traditionally. Um, and so it is looking at history in that sense, right? In the sense that like we might be looking at stories that are fictional, but they tell something about a particular time period, a particular culture, and a particular set of values within that culture.
Excellent. And I remember the last time we talked about this, we had a really fun conversation about some actual stories that this is based on that are quite
Yeah.
funny. What is your current favorite Winter Rabbit tale?
My current favorite. I've got several. There are okay. So there's one that's a little weird to a Western audience. So it's this one where the bear invites Rabbit over for dinner, and when he's cooking dinner, he kind of like cuts himself and lets out a little bit of like oil, like grease, to cook with, and yeah, sounds disgusting, right? But bear grease was sort of like a traditional ingredient for like a cooking oil, right? And anyway, so he does this and he's fine, and the rabbit's like, "Oh, that's really cool. That's really weird." And so then the next week, Rabbit invites Bear over for dinner, and Rabbit tries the same thing and just passes out because he is tiny, he is skinny, he just passes out, and the bear's like, "Oh my god, you can't do that! You don't have this fat built up like I do. You can't do that." And there's one story where the bear just kind of patches him up and goes on. And there's like a longer version where the bear he sort of panics. He goes out looking for a doctor, somebody to help save the rabbit because he's just hurt himself. And the vulture is like, "Oh, I'll take care of him." And so he's like, "But you got to leave me alone in the room by myself, and I'll take care of him." And then, of course, that doesn't go well. And then you get this whole scene with the terrapin like shooting an arrow, laying on his back, shooting an arrow to like shoot the vulture and get him to drop Rabbit. And eventually the rabbit's fine, but it's just like a whole mess. And one of the things that I really like about these stories is that it's so different from the stories we tell today, but it's also different from traditional like European stories because it's just got this different way of relating to things, right? Like this different way of telling them. So I really like that one a lot. I'm probably going to be working on another project for another company that involves some Cherokee stories too. And so I've been reading a lot about a creature called Uktan, which is often referred to as the horned serpent. So it's like a giant venomous snake with antlers and wings and poisonous breath, and it shoots lasers from its forehead. It's a crazy thing in Cherokee folklore. And I'm going to be working on another project related to that. So I've been reading up a lot on that too. And I think those are really cool stories because it's really like the dragon, right? It's like the big bad dragon creature kind of thing from this folklore. And that contrasts a lot with the like really kind of like fables that you tell with the animal stories versus like these other ones that are like got these big monsters and like really crazy mythical things, right? But I don't know if that's the best way of saying that, but really cool stories either way.
Definitely. So how would you say that Winter Rabbit has evolved since its time as a Zenobia entry?
So it's evolved quite a lot. So there are certain things that are definitely the same. So like the core of it, of the way that resources are produced through pulling the villager tokens from the bag, and everybody they go on the spot to produce the resources. That is all very much the same. In the Zenobia version, we also had these player boards that had tiles. So when you were building out your section of the village, you were buying and placing tiles that had effects based on where you place them and things. And that has changed a lot. So the village has just turned into cards. So I've simplified that a lot because the placement of the tiles didn't really matter like so much to the rules, like as the effects of the village cards evolved. And the village cards are what you use to kind of build out your personal engine. As those evolved, the position of them didn't matter so much, and so we just turned those back into cards. But the most important thing is that in the Zenobia version, the main tasks that you did to get points and prepare the village for winter, in the Zenobia version, they were in a river kind of out in the middle of the table, and once you complete one of these task cards, it's gone, and then another one comes out. And the big problem with that was that people were having a hard time like planning ahead. They were having a hard time like preparing for their turn because the card that they were going for might just be gone by the time it gets back around to them. So that got changed a lot. And now we've got a really cool system where you have a hand of task cards at the beginning of each season. Every player is playing one task card, and that task card stays out for the entire season. You cannot complete your own, but other people can complete yours, and they can complete it multiple times. They can complete multiple task cards on one turn, and the task card doesn't go away when it's completed. It just stays out there. And what a task card is you pay some resources to complete it, and you get points. It progresses the village toward being ready for winter, and the person that played it gets a resource benefit as well. So if I complete one of your task cards, you might gain a wood or a crop, but then I get some points for it. So it's simpler. It means that the goals are always out there for the whole season for people to play, so people can plan ahead more. And it also means that you have like some strategy about what you choose to play. Like, do you want to play something that's going to benefit the overall goal of the game, something that's going to get you what you need, something that minimizes your opponent's points? Like, there's different considerations in how you choose to pick and play a task card.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to seeing it, and it's full glory. So I guess the next question is, what made you decide to publish it through Absurdist Productions?
So we had considered a lot of things. We considered going through some other publishers. I had a couple offers, and it was a really complex decision because, and I kind of went back and forth about it a lot. I have some certain very particular goals that I want for the publication of this game. For instance, I wanted to make sure that we hired Cherokee artists to do the art because I wanted to make sure that everything was as authentic as possible. And so we were able to do that. We've got Kendra Swafford, who is a really awesome illustrator, watercolor illustrator, and Johnny Ketcher, who is a great digital artist doing our graphic design. So we were able to do that. And that, not to say that another publisher wouldn't have done that, but that was definitely something that was that was like a no-go, if we couldn't do that. And it's also just a matter of wanting to keep control of this, to build up my own brand and my own business. I just felt like that this was a good place to do it and to keep it here for those reasons. And I think it's going pretty well. I'm really happy with the decision to do so. And like, again, there's lots of really great publishers out there who I think could have done a great job with it, but being completely directly involved like this, I think was the right decision for this particular game.
Awesome. The other thing I noticed about this game is that it has an alternative title that looks like it's Cherokee. Is the full game going to be published bilingually?
So yeah, the if you look at the logo, the alternate title at the top, it says in Cherokee characters Gola Jistu, which just means winter rabbit in Cherokee. The plan right now is for the game to feature both languages on most of the components. So all of the cards will have the titles in both Cherokee and English. The player cards and reference cards will have one side in English and the opposite side in Cherokee. I want to eventually, I'm hoping to include a Cherokee language rulebook in it as well. Now, the effects on a lot of the cards, I wasn't able to make them like language independent or anything like that. And it's not really possible to like do duplicates of those cards. So the effects are going to be in English on the base game, but I'm hoping to be able to also produce a card pack that you can get as an add-on that keeps it entirely in Cherokee. Because I really do want people to be able to play this game entirely in the Cherokee language, if they so choose.
Nice. So, I guess it leads to a question of, so you're taking this to Kickstarter. You want an audience that is a Cherokee audience to really get the most out of this game. And you also want a broader audience to engage with the game. So let's start with I guess the group of people who would be able to play this entire game in Cherokee. That's so cool. Have you been playtesting this game with, I guess, both subsets of people? And what kind of responses are you getting or expecting from people who are from within Cherokee culture?
Yeah, so those are good questions. Most of my playtests have been with hobby gamers, with like that sort of core group. But I've definitely shown the game to a lot of Cherokee people. We've worked directly with a cultural consultant because I'm myself Cherokee, but I also wanted to work with somebody who was a first language speaker who knows a lot of details about the language and the culture that I may be missing. And I think it's also just really important for anybody working in a minority culture to just have a second opinion on those things. So I'm working directly with somebody to make sure that those things are accurate, right? So that's all part of it. How will Cherokee people react to this? So far, everybody that I've shown it to is super excited, right? Like, people just excited just to see that the language and the stories are represented in this form. I think I've had people talk about wanting to use it in classes and wanting to bring it to just different events. Like, I think there's like some really excitement about that. But to be clear, this game is also, it is squarely like in the hobby game market, right? Like, this is a strategy game. It's, to a hobby gamer, it's probably like a medium level of complexity. To like a casual gamer, somebody who's not in that space, it's got, several pages to the rule book, right? It's going to be a little bit much for some people, and I'm recognizing that too. So I'm really trying to like balance this line of like, I want it to be focused toward people who I want it to be a solid entry in the hobby game market. I want to be something that gamers can really like sink their teeth into and really enjoy. And even if they're not part of the culture, have no knowledge of the culture whatsoever, can get an idea of it and get an idea of like what this game, is trying to convey. Right. But then also something that people within the culture can see and appreciate, and on a different level too. It really is a hard thing to balance, right? Because I know that there are plenty of Native American people, Cherokee people who are gamers, and also a lot of people who are going to see this game and who are going to want to take a look at it who maybe don't have a lot of hobby game experience. And I want to make it accessible to them, but I also want to keep it squarely within that hobby game like level of interest, right? I don't know if that answers the question, but that's definitely like a thing that's on my mind, right? Is like, is looking at this. And I've come to places like, I was at the Indigipop conference in Oklahoma City a couple months ago, and I had a few Cherokee people come through there, and one of them was an elder who is a language teacher, and she like, I showed her the prototype, like I showed her some of the cards, and she just like was so happy and smiled and laughed, and like I cannot express to you how like good it feels to see somebody just like give it that level of approval and excitement from somebody who is a first language speaker, an elder who's looking at it like that. So like, that's something that's really important to me and like really, really makes me happy. But I also want it to be something that, gamers pick up and go, this is just a really awesome game, regardless of it having to do with anything cultural, right? I want it to be both.
Absolutely. So I fully believe it's going to be an awesome game to play. But for also for people outside of Cherokee culture, like, what are you hoping, I guess, that they pick up from playing your game?
Right. So I feel like there are throughout the sort of history of board gaming, right? Like, there have been a lot of depictions of native cultures, indigenous cultures that are not the best. And some designers and some historical games and things have done a really good job with it, but the vast majority of them I feel like are really not that great. There's a lot of conflating different cultures, a lot of stereotyping, a lot of things that just don't fit. With this, what I would really love to see, I want people to be able to see, just at a first glance, I want them to see the art, right? And see an art style that is not Southwestern. It's not like the what they might expect to be Native American art, but also they can look at it and go, yeah, this is Native American art, but it's different, right? And I think that the artists we've gotten to work on the game have done a really great job of that. And I think from a first glance visual standpoint, I think that's going to be something that people recognize. After that, like, I want people to see these little snippets of the stories, get like just a familiarity with that. Like, there's a lot of people who probably don't even know that the Cherokee have their own writing system, their own syllabary, right? And so just like to experience that and see that, just to get this, even this base level familiarity with like these things exist. And then to take a look at the way the game makes you play, where it makes you balance personal goals versus the community goals, balance like immediate needs versus thinking a little bit more long-term, and to think about the strategy that they play kind of in those terms. I hope all of that comes across, and I believe that will give that would be a good entry point for a lot of people into, seeing some cultural elements that they may not have otherwise been familiar with.
Excellent. And then, I kind of want to circle back. You talked about getting a cultural consultant. I had really never thought. So I think part of it is that, I think as a community, right, often see a cultural consultant as somebody who just kind of gives the okay for things. And I don't think that that's actually what they're supposed to be used for.
Right.
But what was your experience of having a cultural consultant, and how did it feel to consult someone about a shared culture?
So it felt it felt good and really important. So like in my particular case, it felt very validating because I have done a lot of background research and a lot of work to bring this game up to where it was, and presenting that to our cultural consultant and having them go through and go, actually, this is all really good. And they pointed out a few details that I needed to change, which is great. They also were a translator, so they provided me with translations because my language skills, I'm a very early learner. I've been working on it for a while, but it's very difficult. So the language translation stuff was really important. But that validation of knowing that I've got things right, that I've done my research, I know what I think I know, but then somebody else looks at it and go, yeah, a couple little details to change, but otherwise you've got that right. And that gives me like this backup, because it's really, really important to me that this is authentic, that it really does hit all of those things, because I want that to be expressed to an outside audience that way, but also because anybody that is Cherokee, I want them to know that I want them to see it as legit, right? I want them to see the work that's been put into it. And I want it to also be a tool that helps people convey that knowledge forward, right? There's a lot of things that go into that. And it is just really important to have a second opinion, to like not know that it's on me. And by the way, like not even just our cultural consultant, but also like working with Cherokee artists. At every meeting that we've had, we've sat down and talked about things. We talk about the history of things, how the things were depicted. And like, maybe I was using a reference image that wasn't period appropriate, or maybe we have to change this particular symbol or look at something differently. And there have been like cards that we've changed just because we as three Cherokee people talking about it decided, oh, that doesn't actually make sense in this context. Let me change the theme of this card. I can keep the effect and have it just be something else, so that it fits. It's, culture isn't something that you can that one person just knows everything about, right? Even if you're part of that culture, the existence of it, like what it is a shared experience that people talk about and share between them. So it's really important, even if you're working within your own culture, to have somebody else that you can talk about to make sure that you've got those things right. Because there's always going to be things that you miss, right? Especially when you're working in something like this, like where it's a minority culture within like the greater culture of the United States, that we're trying to like understand what comes from one and what comes from another. But yeah, I think cultural consultants are very important, and like you said, they should not be something that just someone who just signs off on stuff. Like if anybody's out there watching this and they're making a game about a culture, whether it is or is not their own, like bring on a cultural consultant early in the process. Don't finish your game and then bring them on to sign off. Bring them on early on, run things by them, and that way you can catch issues and change things before you get something locked in. Because as I've also worked as a cultural consultant on a few things, and sometimes people have things very like locked in toward the end, and it's like, well, that's not really appropriate, but you can't change it now. So you should have said, you should have talked to me or talked to someone much earlier in the process. I think it's a very important thing to do.
Yeah. I wouldn't want my name in that rule book if I didn't actually manage to.
Right. Yeah.
And then, you mentioned being an early language learner. That is, I love talking about languages and learning them.
Sure.
So, how has the process of working on Winter Rabbit, I guess, brought you closer to the Cherokee language? And how do you improve in practice?
Right. So I, as much as I can, I attend like a Wednesday night study group. There's a lot of like resource. There are a lot of resources out there to help learn the language that the tribe and other organizations have provided. Now that said, the resources are definitely much fewer than you would find in, if you were learning Spanish or Chinese or French or something, right? Like there's way fewer resources, but they do exist, and they exist at different levels for different languages, of course. And luckily with the Cherokee language, there are quite a few resources out there, but it's a challenge because it's about as different from English as a language can possibly be. So it is challenging. But I want to put in the effort to work on that. I've learned how to read the syllabary, the alphabet, and some of the basics, and I've been working on it for a while, off and on. But overall, the game has really brought me closer to a lot of things in the culture. I grew up knowing some of these stories that are included in the game, but there are a lot more that I didn't know. And as I've been working on it, I've dug in a lot more to that. I've learned a lot more things. It makes you think about the way you're having interactions in the game to make sure that those fit with the sort of ideas you're trying to express. I've learned a lot more about sort of some of the iconography and like historical like patterns and things, because a lot of those are reflected in the graphic design of the game. And so there's all kinds of details, all kinds of things that I have dug into so much more than I probably would have had I not been working on this. And I really think that that's been a great experience for me. I really love that I've learned so much from it. I've learned so much about game design, but I've also learned so much about my own culture and language. And I've also been able to work with some really great people in the production of it.
Awesome. So it sounds like Winter Rabbit is a deeply personal project, and I'm really excited to see it. I like playing games and feeling like I learned something about the designer as well as the theme of the game and the game mechanisms. So does it make you more nervous to release that into world than something like Paleo Vet, which is an awesome sounding game about being a dinosaur veterinarian, and that's a previous game you've released?
If you talk to my business partner about this, like he would probably like express this to such a degree that he can see the way that I am so careful about every detail of Winter Rabbit. And the game, the Winter Rabbit game has taken a long time to produce. Like Paleo Vet came together rather quickly, right? And it is a good game and it's a lot of fun. But the basic mechanism of Paleo Vet, like we pulled those together and created those really fast compared to Winter Rabbit. And part of that is like because Winter Rabbit's a little bit more complex of a game. It's a semi-cooperative game, and semi-cooperative games I have learned are just really hard to make. But also making sure all of the cultural aspects and all those details are correct. Yeah, it's definitely a very personal project to me, and I've put in a lot of time and effort to look at all those details and make sure that all those things are exactly so, right? It's very interesting. I've learned a lot about game design through this process. So I think, anything I do in the future will probably come along a lot easier. But yeah, contrasted with something like Paleo Vet, this was a much more difficult project.
Yeah, and you also mentioned that you kind of wanted to have a lot of the production of this one in house, and that you were glad you were
Mhm.
able to sort of shepherd this game every step of the way. You mentioned earlier in our interview that you've got another game about Cherokee stories coming out from another publisher. What made you choose to do that one with someone outside, and
Oh,
what are the kind of differences that make that workable for you?
so my other project, I'm can't announce what it is yet, but it is I am working with Coyote and Crow
All
for
right.
that. So I met Connor, who is the creator of Coyote and Crow, a few years ago, and he brought me on to write a little bit in the Coyote and Crow rule book. And then I've continued to work with them. You know, one of their stories of the Freeland Adventures, I wrote that. I do some RPG work as well, and then they've got some more projects coming out, and I'm going to be working on one of those as well that kind of features some aspects of Cherokee folklore and culture in that particular product. So I'm not going to say too much more about it right now, but it's been really great working with Coyote and Crow, and I hope to continue that relationship as well.
Excellent. And then kind of going back to Absurdist Productions, what are some upcoming projects for your own publishing house? Like, do you want to do something that's as intense and personal as Winter Rabbit for your next project? Or are you hoping to kind of do some light stuff and then maybe come back around?
So we're doing kind of a mix. We're doing kind of a mix of things. So Winter Rabbit is definitely our next one. Like I said, we're trying to bring that to Kickstarter in the summer. After that, we've got a few other projects, and I'm most likely one of my business partner Dave's games is going to be the next one. He's got a really awesome hidden movement game that is more or less design finish. It's a really awesome 2-player game, and most likely that one will be our next project. After that, we've got a few other things. I've got a role playing project, a role playing game that I'm working on. We've done a couple of solo role playing games, and we might continue some more games in that series. And then I've got a few other board game prototypes that are in early stages. So we'll see what comes up. Depends, right? Like a lot of the things I'm working on have been a little bit lighter because I just kind of like that's the direction that I've been kind of pulled in to make some like lighter and easier games. And part of that's just because also like those are the games that I'm bringing to the table, like in my own game nights and stuff, right? Like a lot of my friends are not so much being pulled to the big heavy games, so I'm looking at and feeling kind of feeling the vibes with some like more medium to light kind of like games. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm working on. I'm always messing with something, and I jump between projects a lot. So we'll see where it heads.
Yeah, it's also clear that some of your projects are RPGs versus something like Winter Rabbit, which is a more pure like tabletop game.
Yeah,
Um, do you have a preferred game type to work on?
not at all. Yeah, I am just kind of ADD when it comes to this. Like I bounce between different types of projects. Sometimes I'll get really inspired to write and work on an RPG. Sometimes I'll have a good idea for a card game and I'll just dig into that. Like I bounce between things so much, and for my own workflow, I really just find that like whatever I can like grab onto and kind of hyper focus on, that's what I'm going to work on. So I'm all over the place, right? And it's also just like the way I play games. Like I love big, complicated, stupid games like Warhammer 40K. Like I play that, but then I also love like little card games and hobby games, role playing games. I like the full mix.
Excellent. And then do you find that that you can express different things through different types of games? So you've worked on Cody and Crow,
Mhm.
but I feel like Winter Rabbit is meant to be evocative in a different way.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Coyote and Crow has this very like indigenous futurism kind of take on it, right? Like it's in that like the adventure that I wrote for that was called Raiders of the Burial Mound, right? And I wanted to do something that was like the flip side of a Tomb Raider, Raiders of the Lost Ark thing, where you're going out to find the people that stole the artifacts and bring them back. So I'm telling the story in this very like kind of in that kind of way where I'm looking at like something in popular media and flipping it, right? With Winter Rabbit, I'm looking at how I can express culture ideas through board game mechanics, and I'm looking at a way that I can take aspects of like Euro games and make them have like an indigenous twist, right? So I'm looking at that. Then there's also games like Transformation, which is a solo RPG I did. And I wrote that one really based on my experience during the pandemic, because at that time I was sort of like stuck in a house with another person, and that gets very difficult at times. And so Transformation is this game about you are changing into something, right? Like you start mutating and changing into something, you don't know why or what, but you're dealing with it, and the person that is living with you is dealing with it. And so I just sort of took that personal experience and sort of pushed it to like the horror extreme of it, and wrote that game based on that, right? So I do try to bring in like these ideas and experiences to games, and I usually try to have like some kind of idea that I'm trying to express through the game. So yeah, I yes.
And then what other themes from Cherokee history or culture do you have an interest in making games about in the future?
So I've thought about a few different things. I've thought about a game idea that was based around pottery making, and the patterns on potteries, or the patterns in baskets. And so those are ideas that are kind of way back there. One RPG that I'm working on, or I've got a couple of RPG ideas. One of them is sort of looking at the experience of the Trail of Tears, which is a really, really sensitive thing, and something that I've kind of picked up and put down because I want to handle that with extreme care. Another RPG that's just sort of setting people, not Cherokee specific, but having a setting that is an indigenous community, like a worldwide, wherever you want it to be, kind of indigenous community, and the experience of playing in that kind of environment rather than in playing something like a medieval society, right? So something that is pre-money, very tied to a community and a land, not murder hobos running around getting loot, right? A very different kind of thing. So I've got some different ways that I'm trying to bring those things in, but all of those projects are still very much in process.
Excellent. So I'm just going to try this question. So you mentioned, you're interested in kind of expressing things that are not like stereotypical in our games, and that you've also kind of looked at things like Euro games and thought, oh, how could I like make this Cherokee? What are some themes in games that you see often that would just be cut? If we were able to, I guess, cut games off from like Western culture writ large.
So in creating Winter Rabbit, and very early days of kind of thinking about this, I was thinking about things like 4X games. So I think the 4X framework is very much built on a sort of colonialist, capitalist kind of idea. So what are they? Explore, expand, exploit, exterminate, like very hardcore colonialist kind of ideas. So for my concept, I tried to like create a different framework. It's not really like a one-to-one analog, but it's a little bit like that. And I call it 4 C's. So it's cultivation, continuation. What is the other one? I can't remember. Cultivation, continuation, conservation, and competition. So rather than trying to constantly expand, you're trying to like maintain and continue what you've got going. You're trying to cultivate what you have and produce more from a limited set of things rather than continually exploiting things. And you're also trying to compete in a more friendly, sportsmanlike way rather than completely demolish your enemies. So I tried to take these ideas, and in the Winter Rabbit rulebook, there'll be kind of a little paragraph explaining this concept, right? Take these ideas that fit a more indigenous worldview and use those rather than things like the 4X framework that definitely is as a colonialist kind of idea, right? So that's definitely like an example of kind of what you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, and do you ever have a hard time? Like, I know intellectually that I'm a product of my environment, but I don't know that gives me the perspective to kind of separate all the time. Have you, was that challenging for you even in the making of Winter Rabbit?
Yes. It is a challenge, and I mean, and to be clear, I don't think there's anything wrong with playing something like a 4X game. Like, I like war games. I like hardcore destroy your enemy competition games sometimes, but you do have to like look at these things in context, right? Like, and it does take like a specific effort to think about not just the theming of the game, but also the mechanisms involved to see what kind of interactions they're pulling out of the player. Like, is that fitting the kind of thoughts and ideas and framework? And like, I, don't always do that when I'm just casually playing games, but when I'm designing, like that's definitely the forefront of my mind. Like, what kind of interactions are people going to have, and are those interactions like appropriate to the theme and like tone of the game? But like, I think the main thing about like the industry as a whole and like the games that exist out there is that there are just a lot of games focused on Western culture, focused on sort of capitalist kind of ideas, focused on colonialist kind of ideas. And those don't necessarily need to go away. Some of them should go away, not all of them. But we definitely want more games that are looking at things from different ways, like different perspectives. And I think that's really why things like Zenobia are important, because you're bringing in historical perspectives from people of diverse communities who are going to look at these things in different ways, right? And as a player, I think players really benefit from this because you're going to get very different experiences. Like another one of the Zenobia finalists, Molly House, I love that game. It is another semi-cooperative game that Whirligig Games is publishing, and it's so different from any other like similar games that I've played, that I'm like, this this person has a very different perspective they're bringing to games, and that kind of diversity really does make a difference in the experiences we can have. And as gamers, we should be looking for that, right? Like, we should be looking for like the widest perspectives we can, because we just love playing these games and we want new experiences. That's how you get them, right?
Absolutely. And you've kind of led me back around into something I did want to ask, which is, as somebody who's a previous Zenobia contestant, are you glad you did it? And if you could go back and do it again, what would you do differently?
I am very glad I did it. So Zenobia, I got to work with some really great folks. The mentorship and the feedbacks that I got really helped. The process of it really pushed me, because I was starting to get to a point where I was a little bit burnt out on Winter Rabbit. I wasn't sure where to take it. And this competition really like pushed me forward, right? It got me to like get over a hump and finish the game. And I made some really great friends through it. So like, I still communicate with a lot of the other finalists who are awesome people. And I'm really glad I have that. What would I do differently? I don't know if I would do a lot differently. I think it was definitely a challenge, because it pushed me a lot in a very short amount of time to produce a lot. But I think that was ultimately good for me. And I think the outcome of it, Winter Rabbit took second place. The game that won first place is fantastic. Akar's game that he made is a great game. I think he absolutely deserves first place. So I don't think I would necessarily do anything differently in this case. I was very happy with the outcome.
Excellent. And then I guess we can move into softball questions. So you make a lot of games. You are clearly really working on a lot. Like, that's some impressive creative drive. But what are you playing right now that is making you happy?
What am I playing lately? Oh, let's see. Lately I've played, what is it called? What is the big zoo game?
Ark Nova?
Ark Nova. Yeah, I played Ark Nova recently. I like that. Scout has been really good. I've really enjoyed some little games like Scout. I recently picked up a game called Burn the Fort, which is by another Indigenous designer. And that one's super cool. And what else have I played lately? I've been playing some RPG games. I've been playing Morkborg. Let me think. That's about all I can think of at the moment. Yeah.
Fair enough. And then if people want to follow you online, give us the plug. Where can we find you? Where can we follow your work? And where can we go check out more Winter Rabbit?
So Absurdist Productions is my website, so absurdistproductions.com. We are Absurdist Productions on Facebook and Instagram, and we're on Blue Sky under the same name. And you can also follow Winter Rabbit on Kickstarter right now. It's the preview page is up, so you can take a look at that and follow Winter Rabbit directly on Kickstarter if you want.
Fantastic. I'll make sure all those links are in the show notes, everybody. Will, thank you so much for coming on. It's been so awesome to catch up and check out the progress of Winter Rabbit.
Thank you so much.
All right, everybody. Please like, subscribe, comment, ask questions. And most of all, happy gaming.